Okay, good afternoon parents, and I'm sure more will be joining us, and hello to those on Facebook Live also. Thank you to our all-female panel. It's not a first, but it's not often either. And who'd have thought that we would be talking about online learning as if it were here to stay, which I think that would come up, and I think we can accept that it is here to stay. So I know that every school in Hong Kong has adapted and delivered an online program in a slightly different way. So maybe just to introduce yourselves, could you just give us a very high-level overview as to how your school has been delivering an online program?
Thank you, Ruth. At CIS, we have been delivering online learning all the way from reception all the way through to year 13. But of course, the way that looks in the primary school, as opposed to the secondary school, is quite different. In the secondary school, the school was able to shift their daily schedule onto online, an exact parallel. So the students were able to log on and meet with each of their classes' teachers as per their schedule. Over time, they have adjusted the schedule, however, to accommodate things that we were looking at, especially in terms of well-being and the rhythm of a day as it takes place online. In the primary school, we have, I'm sure those of you who are connected with the primary school can appreciate, we are in probably our maybe 17th or 18th iteration of a schedule because it's just a much more complex process to have young children online. So although we started with our students right from the beginning online, we have learned a lot along the way, and the percentage of time that the students are online for as in relation to the school day varies greatly from our reception students all the way through to our year 6 students. But all of our students are online each day for a percentage of time meeting in small groups, whole class, and as individuals, depending on the nature of their schedule and their age. So it may look quite similar, I imagine, in other schools, but that's some general opening information.
At Harrow International School, very similar as you said. So from our K1 3-year-olds through to our sixth formers, aged 18, they have online provision, and it increases as they move through the schools. So for our K1 and K2, they have a limited amount of screen time, but they also have activities available to them on Seesaw, which is interactive, and their parents can take photographs and comment on the work that they have completed. And it's wonderful to see that. As we move through the school, we then go to a full day's online provision for our pupils. They follow their timetable. They have their extracurricular activities, which are presented online to them as well, and they follow their timetable. And I think similar to what we've heard already, there's no manual for this. Schools finished on the 23rd of January 2020 in Hong Kong, and we were thrown into online learning and had to adapt very, very quickly. I was just saying to Ruth, it's almost a year now that we've been presented with these challenges, and I know that at Harrow our first thought was we must deliver the curriculum, and we focused on the curriculum and ensuring that could keep momentum and that children would have access to their academic studies. And then as time went on, we developed this to offer what we call our super curriculum and our co-curricular activities and our tutor periods. So it's something which has been through various phases, and no doubt this will continue over the coming weeks and the coming months. And we're also now faced with what we call hybrid learning. So there's been lots of challenges, but I think I'd just like to say that I think the first question was, is it here to stay? How are we coping? Well, I don't think we've got a lot of choice given the situation we're in at the moment. And I am very proud of how our pupils at Harrow Hong Kong have adapted, and indeed how creative our teachers have been to this new way of teaching, this new way of learning, and I'm sure that's the case in all our schools here.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's been evolving, and at Hong Kong Academy, it's not dissimilar to what some of the other schools are doing. I think one of the things that we wanted to do, knowing that our play group, starting with our 2-year-olds, would be online up through our grade 5s, was, really hang on to the tenets of the school and the importance of community, the importance of giving kids opportunities to be social, and the role that joy has in learning. And so when we thought about that. We really thought about how can we reimagine this. And so again, similar to the other schools, we're making sure that our kids have consistency. We know that that's important. So every grade level has a morning meeting in the primary school. At some point they have whole group instruction, again, similar to the other schools. Then there's small group instruction, individual instruction if it's needed. We have dedicated Tuesdays to being specialist days. So that's the day where they get their co-curricular subjects. So they have their PE and their visual arts and their music and their library time on those Tuesdays, and that's a day completely dedicated to that. Kind of gets them off screen a little bit. We also have a project day for our students. We call it HKA Prime, and that's personal, relevant inquiry through meaningful engagement. So again, bringing that joy in, bringing that self-directed, that engagement, that motivation for the students. As our children move up into the secondary school, it is a synchronous program. So similar to what the other schools are doing is the students follow their timetable and their day. Again, really kind of infusing different project work with the students so that we still hang on to those things that are so important to our students.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot to unpack here, and we'll stick with primary for the moment. It all sounds wonderful, and how are the parents coping with this, and how much do you rely on the parents to make sure that what you're delivering is successful? And certainly for working parents as well. You'd have to take that.
Sure. You know, it definitely has not been without its challenges. I think that everyone has had to reimagine. There's different dynamics in every home. We do have working families, and and what we have really relied on is feedback from parents so that we're very much aware of what's going on in their family, as well as the community. Twice a week, the counselors and the principals offer sessions to the parents where they spend time with us online in a Google Meet getting support. And they get support from the counselors, they get support from the principals, but they also get support from each other. And it gives them this understanding that they're not alone in this.
Yes, I think that we have to accept there are people in very different situations, and I think it's been very tough for parents to be working from home and their children learning from home, and I never underestimate how challenging that will have been for our families, and this is something which has been going on for a long time, as I said earlier, and an awful lot of uncertainty around it. We've never been quite sure when the children are coming back to school, and living with that uncertainty is difficult. And so we've supported our parents as well, and their insights have been incredibly useful as we have adapted. And I think for parents it's just trying to manage their own anxieties around COVID and around the virus, giving their children a routine, having checklists, giving them some structure, perhaps not over talking about COVID too much, not being too obsessed with social media and the news, what's going on, trying to be ultimately positive and optimistic, and also having things in the day such as walks, hikes, getting outdoors is really key for parents, and there's no easy answer to this at all, and it has been difficult, and like schools have had to adapt, parents have had to adapt too, and I think we will acknowledge it's been a challenging time for them.
Many of the things that have been mentioned are similar to what has been happening at CIS with supporting parents. Another thing that comes to mind is that we've tried to engage parents in contributing to the process by posting things, for example, on Padlets that promote a sense of community and connectedness, because parents are so closely involved with what their children are doing at home. For the first time ever, have a real glimpse into the curriculum as it is living with their children. Also, I would say those opportunities for communities to come together online, to hear parents' perspective, and for them to simply have an opportunity to express their uncertainty, their frustration, their anxieties. I think that has been actually a collective, helpful opportunity that happens on a regular basis as well. And the other piece that comes to mind is, and I'm sure everyone here can agree, the remarkable speed with which even our young learners have learned a certain level of independence with the approach to learning online. The children have adapted incredibly quickly, And I think what we've seen over the past few months is that parents have become more comfortable or more confident that their children can manage to start their lesson, listen to their teacher, interact with their peers online. So I think that our own students' technological skills growing and their confidence and independence has also given our parents a sense of calm that even young learners understand how the school day online will happen. And that's just grown over the past few months, so it's been a helpful process.
Yeah, without a doubt, the children are amazing. They can adapt very quickly and very well. But as parents, we've spent years believing that we should take the screens away from our children, the young children, and now we're suggesting that they spend quite a lot of time on the screen. So I want to ask you as educators, and what's the science behind? And I know that CIS, for example, certainly went to some recorded lessons so the children could manage their own time. So could we talk a little bit about how much screen time is too much with this, what we're dealing with?
Great question. I can't say that I know the science perfectly, and I think some people who have far more expertise in the field are also changing their views in relation to screen time in the past few months. What I will say, though, is that the concerns around screen time have been consistent, I think, in all schools around the world, because we don't necessarily know the impact, and maybe we won't know the impact for decades even. So we've been certainly adjusting and trialing different things, and one of them was going to asynchronous learning in some respects at some times. So our specialist classes in certain phases went to an asynchronous mode, so that children would have the agency to choose when and how they access their specialist lessons throughout the week. And that was well received to some extent. However, that live connection was also, people craved that as well. So what we have learned is to provide both opportunities for our students to connect with their specialists live, whether in person in the hybrid, of course, but also online, but also have opportunities to connect with the learning in the time that they would like to. So that's been, I think, a growing thought for us, is what other asynchronous aspects can we layer into the experience for even our young learners, and it gives families a greater sense of control. And then some families may opt more for the asynchronous, while as others may opt for the more live and synchronous learning. It's been something we've been trying. I can't say that we know for sure if it's perfect, but we're living and learning every day.
Yes, we're definitely living and learning every day. And similar situation at Harrow. What we did for our younger children is we had the recorded lessons, so they could choose then when they listened to those, and it was easy because they could play them back if they just didn't understand something initially. We also have screen-free days, so there would be a day when the pupils were off screens and were set a particular project, so they didn't have to use the computer at all. We have a 2-week timetable for our prep school and our senior pupils, and they have 3 lessons of humanities per fortnight, for example, and one of those would have been a screen-free lesson, so 2 out of 3 would have been on Zoom. And it's just about managing it, as you say, and everybody has different preferences, but it's putting those in place. And I think what's been important when they've come back to school is also to try and create lessons where there is very little technology. So there's a lot more face-to-face interaction, discussion, collaboration, and we're trying to keep them off those screens as much as possible now they are back in school.
Thank you. And to add on, I think one of the ways that we look at children on screens and technology is we went back to the core of why we were using technology and the purpose behind it. And so all of our students are using school devices. And so we've made it really clear to the families that these devices are very different than perhaps devices you have in your home. These devices are for a very specific reason, and that's for learning, and that's how they're intended to be used. And so it's very clear to the parents that the technology of the devices are a tool for learning, very similar to a pen, a pencil, or a ruler. And so like CIS and Harrow, we are also doing things where there's a nice mix for the students, where there's a whole bank of read-alouds. So you could have a read-aloud from a 4th grade teacher even though you're a 1st grade student. So dipping into those. There's movement breaks that are, again, across the entire school, as well as even the students are posting movement breaks. So again, really using technology is a very powerful tool to also create community. So having those special event days where we're all being part of a sports day that's virtual, or we did a beautiful art gallery where the students submitted their artwork and we did a virtual art gallery, helping children to see, and parents to see, the importance of this technology at this time as well.
It all sounds incredibly complicated, and I'm sure it is. I mean, speaking as a parent, I wonder, how does a parent, if you're providing a parent with a lot of choice, which in some sense might be appreciated, but perhaps it also can be overwhelming. And so what guidance are you providing to parents on how to manage? Is it a case that the individual class teacher will know that individual student and say, well, actually, his or her learning style is better following an asynchronous method? Or I'm just wondering, you know, to provide that emotional support to the parents who are undoubtedly stressing out.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a couple of different things. One of the things, a word we use a lot in education is differentiation. And I think that it's really important to recognize that every home dynamic is going to be a little bit different. And so it's one, knowing the student, but then also knowing the family and knowing the home. You know, you have a student who's very self-directed, but they're learning in a home where there's 3 other children. And finding a quiet space, going on for their Google Meet with the teachers. So again, knowing each family's dynamics. And we spent a lot of time having individual meets with families and just talking to them about what are your individual family needs to support you in your online learning.
Yes, and I think at Harrow it goes in our lower school through our class teachers, and the upper school through their tutors and their housemasters and housemistresses, and it's about having a central person who knows the child, who knows the family, is keeping close contact with them and understanding their situation and trying to adapt accordingly. I don't think there's any one way with this, and it's just about parents knowing that the school cares, and the school is there and willing to help, and there's various channels, whether it be the house reps, the parent forums, direct to a member of the senior leadership team via their contact point of a housemaster, housemistress, class teacher, that there is someone there who understands and will do their best to support them through these challenging days.
All very similar for CIS, I would say. In the primary school, the class teachers, and in the secondary school, the advisors and heads of year have done a tremendous job of just keeping in touch and encouraging parents to let us know. With schools with so many hundreds of kids, well over 1,000, there's no perfect system, as Anne mentioned. It's really just regularly reminding parents, let us know what are your circumstances. And we also know that probably the same with Harrow and HKA, that we have a number of families who are not back in Hong Kong, who are spread across the world still months later. So I believe we've adjusted to a much higher level of individualized understanding and communication with our families because of the circumstances that we're in, and we just have to keep at it and continue to provide opportunities for people to share with us. Which we haven't mentioned yet, but also surveys, community surveys have been instrumental in gathering people's feedback and understanding where families are at.
I think all 3 of the schools have been constantly iterating, as you say, through with parent feedback. I just want to ask about, obviously, Friday night, last night, everyone was scrambling around because the primary classes are closing again from Monday. And if we look back at the past year, we have had periods of children going back to school. And so I want to ask you a little bit about this like on again, off again process. How does it work when you have children back in school, and how do you then prepare overnight that children won't be back in school on Monday?
My colleague and I were just speaking about this a few minutes ago, and we were reflecting on the remarkable ease with which the staff accepted, okay, we know what to do, we're ready. And that has only come through months of experience. We could have certainly not been this calm or prepared several months ago. The online schedule has been established, and yet again, even yesterday, we tweaked it, knowing certain things that needed to be changed. But the online schedule was ready, learning materials were prepared, and teachers were ready to move forward with communicating with parents. I think it's really only just through our own experience in building these brand new systems that we can go back and forth. We knew several months ago that it would probably be like this, and certainly this week, from last Thursday, the closure of kindergartens through to yesterday has proven to be that exact scenario. Several changes in a week, but our staffs have been ready for it, and I believe our parents are in a different place now than they were a few months ago as well, that we have empathy for each other, and we understand that we need to move forward and use the systems that we have and make adjustments as we go.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's just the new normal now that we can transition from face-to-face to online learning, and that's for everybody, I think, all members of our community, the pupils, the parents and the staff. And I agree with all that you've said, Virginia, there. I just have to say that I am just so impressed with the young people who are online learning, and they come back to school, and there's a staggered start to school. We have the older ones in and then the younger ones, and they just come in. You would never believe they haven't been in school for months, for how they adapted and settled into a different way of learning. And likewise for the staff who had to approach teaching in a different way online, and then we're back to face-to-face. And we talk about wanting to equip our young people with qualities such as resilience, grit, motivation, being self-starters, team players, leaders, think creatively, think strategically. And we've worried about Generation X and how they would cope with working in a very different way than we're used to, and working at home or out at Starbucks with a computer in front of them. And I think that this has actually supported and helped them. I don't think we have any worries at all about how they're going to cope. And it has enabled them to, they've had to be motivated, they've had to be independent in the way that they've approached their learning. And I'm hoping, I take some comfort out of the fact that I think it'll stand them in good stead going forward in the future.
Thank you, Anne. I agree. I think that one of the things that we have learned through this online learning time is how very capable our students are. And you often think about when kids are in school, they're quite directed. They're directed by their teachers, their coaches, their after-school activities, and they've really had to show their agency and be agentic in terms of being self-motivated, taking that initiative, and working through online. I think, again, just adding on, I think it's all about preparation, just knowing that this was a possibility and being prepared. Really, immediately devices went out with the kids yesterday when they went home, materials, other resources from the classroom, books from the library, all went home with the students so that on Monday they are ready to go.
But how important has it been that there have been periods of physical school? How do you think things might have been different if children were out of school for, how many months was it? Was it 3 or 4? More than it was. I mean, I'm just wondering, so say for example, assessments. Has it been a time when children are back in school, okay, now is the time to do those checkpoints and quizzes and to see what they really have learned, and that's been important. Just wonder if it would have been different if the closure was much more extended.
Potentially, yes. When the children came back to school in September, starting in September, what was enormously helpful for us was our entire student support services team combined with class teachers. We did broad sweeping baseline assessments in all core areas with every single student, including a well-being instrument that was used. So I think that would have been far more complex data to gather if the students were still online. And that data gave us a big picture understanding of the whole school as well as cohorts and individual children in terms of their core learning skills. What was remarkable about it was similar to what Anne just said. We were amazed at still how strong our students' skills were in all areas across the board. Certainly there were individuals And there are certain pockets of skill areas that we knew we needed to make plans for booster sessions for our students. So that is one thing I am enormously grateful that we've had the opportunity in person to really gauge where our students are, because that's been one of the big questions all of us have had as educators, school leaders, is how are they doing? How is their learning progressing? And I have to agree, I think our students have grown in these just incredible ways that we could have never imagined a few months ago. And we're just so grateful for it. And I've said to many parents and colleagues, one other thing that struck me is when the students came back, they all seemed so mature, like in a way that, I don't know, I just felt the beginning of the school year with primary age kids, they seemed so young, but when they came back, they seemed to have a level of self-assurance and maturity that really just astounded me. So, but I would say that's the big advantage that we've had in having the kids back, is understanding, being able to assess widely and get a real sense of where they are and make plans for how we will make adjustments in our curriculum and provide extra support for students as needed.
So one of the things that we noticed that it was very different when children came back in May, because those were students who had been with their teacher from the beginning of the year. They had already had half a year with those students. And so the teachers knew those students and really were able to assess them online, because again, they knew what to expect from them and what they were capable of and what they were doing. It was very different starting a school year where teachers hadn't met their students before. And so that was a very different type of getting to know your students and getting to really understand where they were. So it was really critical for them to come back. But in addition to the importance of those assessment pieces, the social opportunities were critical for the students to have that. You know, they had to come back, physical distance, mask on, all types of different requirements with hand sanitizing and cleaning your, wiping your spaces. You know, teachers thought, how are they going to do this? They're sitting in desks, they're no longer in their pods. And the kids were just so happy to be back together and to be connected. And that, I think, was more important than anything.
I agree, and what a joy it was to see them together, chatting to each other, just being relaxed and having fun. That's childhood, so much of childhood is about having some carefree days and having fun, in my view, and exploring things and being curious and laughing together. And it really did bring me an awful lot of joy to see them back in school. Schools are very empty places without children, and the corridors are full of chatter and laughter of young people. That's what it should be like. So I agree with the social piece, and that's what we've had to work on. Working in collaboration, working together has been really, really key. They missed each other, they really did, and they missed being with their friends and seeing their teachers and being in that environment. The assessments obviously is challenging, and we've heard a lot today. I mean, there's only one more thing I would add, in that we are very conscious that the exams in 2020 were cancelled, and the pupils were then having to be assessed by their teachers, and that was having to be evidence-based. And every piece of work that they then did from that period was towards the grade that they were awarded. And I think there's a lot of anxiety around exam classes at the moment. Every test they have, every piece of work they submit, they're very concerned that it may be the same case, that this will go towards their overall grade. And it's placing a huge amount of stress on our young people. And of course, we're trying to reassure them and offer them as much support around that, but they are 16, 17, 18, wanting to do their best. They have high aspirations.
Knock-on effect. So how do we support the students, let's stay with secondary for a moment, to really make up for those gaps, those missing bits?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether we're face-to-face or online, there are always going to be students who are in that situation. I think that's where those child study teams come in, where you are really coming together as a group of educators, professionals, experts to support those students. And that's true whether they're on campus or home learning. And so it's a matter of coming up with how are you going to support this student. And, you know, under the guise of childcare, some students have had to come on campus to get the face-to-face support that they have needed to be successful.
Sorry. Absolutely. I think that, of course, there are those cases in primary going all the way up to secondary, and connecting with what Anne has said, certainly our exam-based classes and students have really been under a special, particular type of stress. And again, ultimately, I don't think that it's any one particular system. It's just staying vigilant in supporting individual families case by case. Certainly our counselors, our heads of year, and our advisors have probably experienced the highest level of traffic that they've ever experienced in terms of communications with families. And we have talked more about well-being in the past 9 months than ever before, because we know that it's critical to learning and paying special attention to that. So the school, the secondary school, did make quite a big shift in their schedule, and you can appreciate from a secondary point of view, changing a schedule it's a complex endeavor, but putting the students' well-being in the center, knowing that there is such special stress around exams, we felt that that was the most important thing for us to do. And we do feel that it has paid dividends, because it's given students opportunities to be with their advisors and to spend very intentional time together for advisors to really keep track of each of the students, knowing that they do care a lot about their exams and the opportunities that they have for learning. So I'd say it's really keeping in touch and keeping a close eye and communicating with families is essentially what it boils down to.
I don't think I can add much to that. Keeping in touch and keeping a close eye and communicating with families and the child, and putting in strategies in place. And as you said, right at the beginning, it can happen when there's face-to-face lessons as well as online. And we're experienced with this, and it's just about doing the right thing for that child.
So just finally, I want to turn our attention to the staff. We talked about well-being of the parents and the students, and how have you supported the staff in managing this seismic shift in the way that they work, and where, you know, perhaps some teachers are not super comfortable with all the tech, and has that had an impact on your hiring policies or your professional development? I assume it has.
Yes, Ruth, you're right. It's been a lot of emotions to manage around staff, and I remember, again, back on the 3rd of February when we were moving to Zoom, we had a training session that very day, and there were some people who adapted and very quickly and are very savvy with technology, and others were very, very nervous, including me. And the children are so au fait with this. They can tell us what to do, and that's what I do in the end. What am I supposed to do here? I ask them. But teachers were very nervous initially. They want to do a good job. They want to do the right thing by the children, and they were very anxious about it. And so there's a lot of emotions to manage around that. There's also a lot of uncertainty for them, as well as everybody else, over the virus, and they have their own personal situations to deal with. But in our school, in particular at Harrow, we've got a lot of expat teachers. They're a long way from their families. They're concerned about families from home. Some of them haven't been back to their home countries or won't have been back for over a year. It's a very, very different lifestyle for them. I always think that a lot of people who are here working abroad are a sort of certain type of people, are free-spirited and adventurous, and are here because they want to be in Hong Kong, they want to travel in Asia, and all that has been taken away from them. So staff needed a lot of support, and likewise they haven't been able to get together as a community in the ways that we normally do. We can't go into the staff room every break time. They're working in their little pods and within their own departments, so there hasn't been that social interaction for them. And they've needed a huge amount of support, and again, it's similar to what we've just said about the children. It's been putting in staff wellbeing sessions, it's giving access to our counselling teams. We've had online quizzes, we've had online scavenger hunts, we've had, we're doing an initiative at the moment called Stepping Up, where the staff are all in small teams, and it's a challenge of how many steps we can do a day. So it's trying to be creative, as you are with everything else, to keep people motivated, keep people happy, to support people through these changes. And I think we're in a very different place than we were back in January, February now.
Yeah. I think, I guess one of the things I really discovered about the teachers is that not all superheroes wear capes. They have been amazing. And to think that, you know, they have had to adapt. They've had their entire identity turned upside down. If you think about how important being an educator is for these teachers, and suddenly it's been turned on its head. And then they've had their own children at home that they're also trying to support. You know, Anne spoke about the long distance. You know, we've had deaths, we've had illness. People can't go home. They're quarantining on both sides. You know, and so what's been our strength has been our community and coming together to support. So the teacher who's tremendously savvy with their technology is supporting that teacher that isn't. The other teacher who's really quite creative in developing their video is supporting. So it's aces in their places, everyone coming together, community support. You know, we did Academy Awards for the best video. We had a big red carpet event. We do virtual exchanges where we all get together for an hour and you sign up for different things and you come together. You know, so again, the strength has been in our community and being able to support our teachers with their well-being.
I'm not sure I can add much more to that. Very similar practices in terms of supporting teachers emotionally, their well-being, and also professionally. Just knowing that teachers are their starting places with technology were very different in their comfort levels, and providing very strategic and differentiated professional development has been extremely important, but also building in a whole range of staff well-being, creative opportunities for people to connect. I think the connections are the most important. And the one other thing that comes to mind that I think has been so incredible and unique about this experience for teachers is that their craft was completely on display, maybe for the first time ever. And we do know, you know, as probably many teachers, former teachers in this room, as a teacher, when a visitor walks into your classroom, even if you think you have designed the greatest lesson ever, there's a moment of kind of, oh, somebody's in my classroom. And now suddenly teachers are teaching online and they have a whole host of audience every day for every lesson. So that's been something for us to be very aware of and sensitive to in supporting our teachers adjusting to that, and also finding ways to celebrate the amazing work that they're doing with their online teaching so their confidence can grow and their sense of calm can grow as well. I think they're in a much better place now than they were a few months ago, but I think that shift mentally for perhaps most of our teachers was really massive, and it was something as school leaders that I think we needed to keep reminding ourselves of, because although we too are online with parents frequently, teaching online in front of your students' parents every single day is a special level of stress and exposure. So I think that that's been a really big piece for us to keep reminding ourselves about and supporting our teachers.
Sorry, but I do think, however, I agree with everything that's been said, but I was very much of the message, it is business as normal. And I think we also kept telling ourselves that we were here to provide a service to the children, to the parents, and deliver on the curriculum and all the extras that we provide as well. And I think that also had to keep us grounded.
There was the semantics at one point when people were talking about schools are closed. They're not closed, they're just delivering an online programme. But can we all agree, do we prefer physical school? We prefer to have children in school laughing and seeing their teachers in classes. Are we all in agreement on that, or are we not? We all are in agreement. We'll leave it there. Thank you. We have a small crowd. Do we have any questions from the floor for our panellists?
Thanks so much for having this panel on such an important topic for us parents. Question about the use of technology. I know Ms. Hunter mentioned about celebrating the use of technology we all do to empower learning, and really appreciate Ms. Haydon's sharing specific examples of how we need to strike the balance and provide more screen-free days or screen-free hours. So my question as a parent is, are there best practices you can share from the school in how we can healthily pull back on the use of technology in light of clearly inevitable long-term, irreversible impact on eyesight. And I asked this question specifically, hopefully with two parts. One is, are there measurements that school can consider and therefore implement, such as maximum 5 hours of screen time is acceptable for high school and 2 hours for primary? Are there measurements that you can advise and share so we parents know, oh, that's a good target? And then secondly, are there specific examples that you can implement in class? What do we mean by screen-free hours or screen-free days? Does it mean we don't need smart boards necessarily because there isn't an overriding technology imperative advantage? You could simply use a blackboard. So what are some specific in-class examples for both primary and secondary? We're just really lost as parents despite many school notice. And again, thank you for all the efforts the school does. We can't thank you all enough, but we just need more education. Thank you.
I'm sure there are lots of articles and lots of papers been written on how much screen time children of various ages should have access to. And I can't say that I've read them all. And I think it's back down to the individual, and you will have different children who and have different views on this, and different parents who will have different views on this. What I think is important is the balance. I'm a great believer in having balance in one's life. And I think we also have to acknowledge that we live our lives by technology. I mean, frankly, I could live my life through my iPhone, and it is here to stay. But it's back to that balance, and in the classroom we can have the screen-free days, and when they come back, when they are back in class and they are face-to-face lessons, I think collaboration, getting them at the front, public speaking, that's something they can't do to the same extent on Zoom or Teams. So having them speaking from the front and having the confidence to lead small groups and small group work is something that we can implement, and getting them to be creative in how they present their work. But I also think it's about role modelling and about how us as adults are using technology, and are we limiting the times that we are using it? Are we saying that we don't use our phones after 7 o'clock at night, or we have X number of hours when we don't use our phones, or we don't use a digital device, so that the young people are having good role models. And I also say to parents at Harrow, when they say it's very, very difficult to get my child off their phone, off their computer, they're gaming, they're talking to their friends, you literally sometimes have to take it away from them. And I'll say, blame me if necessary, tell them that I told you to do that. But sometimes you have to say, no, that is not the time. You'll be reading during this time, we're going out for a walk, do some artwork, do something different, and let them be creative and find other ways to occupy themselves. So it's having a certain discipline around it, and they won't like it, they certainly won't, but I think that's something that's really important.
I'm thinking about a couple of the questions that you posed. In terms of limiting screen time in the classroom, I think it's probably the same at Harrow and HKA. What that means for us is that while the teacher may be projecting onto a screen, the children wouldn't be using devices. So I think that's basically the definition of screen-free at school, and that has certainly been the case in our return to school, that we have used devices very minimally and very intentionally, knowing that they have had so much screen time with online learning. In terms of the online learning, as Anne said, there's so much written about it, but again, as far as I have understood over the past few months, even experts' viewpoints on screen time have changed in light of this new era that we're living in. So while we don't have the perfect science or all of the answers, we have to find our way in what we feel is the best approach for each age, and we are learning as we go. And I think what's complex about the situation is that every family's view is different as well. And we definitely have had families of even very young learners who would prefer much more time with teachers online, and families of older learners who say it's far too much time. So it's really been a very nuanced and challenging path to navigate in finding the right balance. What we've come to realize is that, of course, it's scaled. The percentage of time that the youngest learners are online is significantly less than the older learners, but we've also learned that screen time is often a time to connect, build some understanding and relationship together, and then have learners, even young learners, go off to do things offline so that there's a back and forth between the two as opposed to a sustained time online. But it is, I can appreciate from a parent's viewpoint, it's very, very worrying to see how much of the time your child might be looking at the screen, but we have been thinking very carefully about the variety of ways in which the children are interacting online, and certainly we can all agree it's not passive consumption, that it is a very interactive and a meaningful process that they are connecting with each other and building their skills and then taking some things offline. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add, whether it's screen time at home or at school, it's the purpose. Why are we using this screen? Can we learn another way? So we're not using technology just for the sake of technology. It really is, it's really enhancing, and it is the most effective way to the teaching. And that is what we frame all of our planning around. What is the purpose behind the child needing to be on the screen? And does it enhance, and is it for effective learning?
It's really interesting, and the modelling part. I mean, I'm the worst. You know, I look at how I live by my iPhone. It's in my hand constantly, and so modelling for our children. So when the school day is finished, when they're off of Zoom, just get out and do something else off the screen. Does that answer your question, Rita? Very complicated question. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, then it just remains for me to thank my panellists, as always. Thank you to Anne from Chinese International School, Anne from Harrow International School, Virginia from Hong Kong Academy. Thank you, ladies, and thank you for listening.
We also want to thank Ruth for moderating this panel, so thank you very much, Ruth.